action. Welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billie. I've been away for a couple of weeks. I'm recovering from a little surgery on my face to have something unmentionable removed. I should be fine. I am going to have a scar, but you're looking at it and you can't see it because it's out here. That's probably more information than you wanted to have, but this gave me an opportunity to do some knitting and also to prepare a little bit of a video for you. So it's not my typical show, but let me show you what I'm talking about. So you will recall that about a year ago, I think it is, I started knitting for the Rink or the Lynx. And I was doing this beautiful, nice, tight weave using stranded knitting. And just to refresh your memory, after I was done knitting all four parts, the front, the back, the left sleeve, the right sleeve, and I assembled it, it had absolutely no give. And I had a hard time putting my arms through and pulling it over my head and having it really feel comfortable. So I put it in a timeout for a long time. I was really very annoyed with it. But the time came to revisit it. So last podcast, I was explaining to you how I was able to salvage the ribbing and knit in the other direction from it. So I have made this much progress. I don't know if this is going to be the front or the back yet. I have to wait and see which comes out better. But I stopped here and I started on the opposite side. So I wanted to show you that. It's messy because now I'm using the intarsia method. I have all of these bobbins hanging and the yarn has been reconditioned, so it's not in pristine condition. This particular yarn doesn't really come back to being completely smooth. It's still a little kinky, even though I've soaked it overnight in some instances. Anyway, I ripped out one whole part of the sweater and made little bobbins. Actually, I've made a bunch of different bobbins and I've gone through some of them already, but this is the current batch that's all hanging down here. Now, if you've never worked with bobbins, the thing to know is you want to keep the length of yarn from your work to the bottom as short as you possibly can. This is a really good example because this strand of yarn is too short for it to reach over to here to get tangled up with the others. So right now, mostly everything is untangled, I believe. And I wanted to explain why I have two sets of knitting needles hanging here. So I have done a provisional cast on. Instead of starting casting on at the bottom of the ribbing and knitting 3 or 6 inches of ribbing, I did a provisional cast on using this size 1 US needle right here. Let me show you just how thin that is. Here's the size 1 needle, and that's the thickness of its cord. This is a size 2. They're both ChiaoGoos, and ChiaoGoo has a completely different system for these, which I think they call mini, and this is small, if I'm not mistaken. So it's 2 different cord systems, and those are not at all interchangeable. This is a completely different animal than these, which go from, I think, size 2 to maybe size 8, something like that. Anyway, I did a provisional cast on using this cord. So here's my cast on, right onto the cord instead of onto provisional stitches. And then I started to knit up from here. So I've done this much. After I've completed this whole side, I will come back and I'll already have this cord in, and this is the size needle that I'll be doing my ribbing on. I know that from last time around that I want to I want my ribbing on a size 1 needle. So the needle will already be here waiting for me to just proceed to knit down in this direction. So just to recap and reiterate, I can knit this way and I can knit this way because I have needles in both of those sets of stitches. So that's where I'm at so far. The rest of this video, you will not be seeing me. You'll be hearing my voice. I've prepared a short clip talking about Argyle patterns, and because this sweater is called For the Rink or the Links, links refers to golf course. As you'll hear, Argyle and golf are interconnected. So let me roll that for you, and I'll come back at the end just to wrap up and say goodbye.
Since I'm in the throes of completely reknitting For the Rink or the Links, I thought it'd be interesting to chat with you about Argyle, golf fashion through the ages, and the role that Scotland played in all of this. When we think of fashion today, we generally turn to France and Italy. It turns out that Scotland has historically played a big role in fashion too, with its Gansey fisherman sweaters, Fair Isle jumpers, Harris tweed, Shetland lace, and Argyle. Pringles of Scotland has helped keep Scottish knitwear on the map. If you collect vintage knitwear as I do, you may have one or two of these labels. According to their website, one of the most iconic signatures is the geometric Argyle pattern. They say it is perhaps most finely associated with the putting green and was originally elevated to cult status by His Royal Highness the Duke of Windsor, who was soon copied by his fashionable set. Edward VIII was the most photographed celebrity of his time, a man whose rank, travels, good looks, and unmarried status gained him much public attention. When he bounced onto the green at St. Andrews in Scotland on September 27, 1922, sporting tweed jacket, knickerbockers, and a cloth cap, it was his colorful geometric pattern Fair Isle jumper that caused a sensation. I've provided a link to the video sent me by Colette, a loyal subscriber to this channel. This type of hand-knit sweater had been a fisherman's working garment, but the prince had elevated it to high fashion. Argyle knitwear also became fashionable in Great Britain and then in the United States after the First World War. The Duke, like others, used this pattern for golf clothing, both for jerseys and the long socks needed for the +4s trouser fashion of the day. With that, he helped popularize a casual golf attire. Argyle was originally derived from the tartan of Clan Campbell of Argyle in Western Scotland. The tartan would have featured on kilts, plaids, and patterned socks worn by Scottish Highlanders since at least the 17th century. Although many fashion brands worked with the recognizable diamond motif, it was commonly accepted that Pringle was its originator, an instantly recognizable design thanks to its distinctive diamond or lozenge motif, which typically has an overlay of intercrossing diagonal lines on solid diamonds. I think the pattern on my sweater could safely be called a variation of Argyle, don't you? In preparing this episode, I fell down the proverbial rabbit hole, first researching the origins of the game of golf, then researching what players were wearing and who was setting the trends. Golf started at St. Andrews in Scotland back in the 1500s. Men were wearing thick woolens, tweeds, and plaids to protect them from the cool, harsh winds blowing off the water. Golf attire was rather formal in the early centuries, involving shirts, ties, and waistcoats. Edward VIII wasn't the only royal fashionisto. In the late 19th century, his grandfather, Edward VII, Prince of Wales, later King of England, had the first tuxedo designed. It was a blue silk smoking jacket with matching pants and initially was not considered formal wear. It wasn't until 1885 when American James Brown Potter, on a visit to the UK, saw the Prince of Wales wearing it, that the tuxedo gained mass appeal. Potter, a coffee tycoon who lived in the wealthy Hudson Valley enclave of Tuxedo Park, an hour north of my home in New York City, brought the outfit back to New York. He wore it to the Tuxedo Club Autumn Ball in 1886 and gave the garment its now official name. As long as I'm doing 6 degrees of separation, let me mention the wife of Edward VIII, a fashion icon in her own right, the American divorcee for whom he abdicated the throne. Wallace Simpson was seen in one of my earlier videos enrobed in the shocking lobster gown by surrealist designer Elsa Schiaparelli. It was Scap's famed bow-knot sweater that had me hopping the pond to see it earlier this year. If you didn't see my Paris video, you should check that out. But I digress. By the 20s and 30s, having gained popularity among wealthy circles, golf attire was elevated to a more formal look with single-breasted jackets, neckties, and spectator shoes. The short man in this photo is Gene Sarazen, one of the world's top players in the 20s and 30s. He competed wearing knickers or plus fours even into the 1970s. In the 90s, Payne Stewart, the American golfer, set his own trend for flashy style on the golf course. He pulled his inspiration from the past by reviving the Scottish lynx look, sporting elegant knickers, patterned sweaters, and Argyle socks. For a large part of his career, Stewart was known for his sponsorship by the National Football League, whereby he wore the team colors of the geographically closest NFL franchise. I visited Scotland last fall and will be taking a small group of people back to Scotland with me for the week leading up to Shetland Wool Week, September 2023. If you're interested in joining us for a cultural visit to Edinburgh and Glasgow to see some of the world's greatest art and architecture, make a note in the comments here or private message me on Instagram or Ravelry at billietoy.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I hope all of you are well. Don't forget, if you're going in the sun, please use sunscreen. It's really important. That's my public safety announcement. Happy knitting, everyone. See you next time.